15 years of marriage, and I thought we had a solid foundation. Sure, there were ups and downs. What marriage doesn't have them? But then, 18 months ago, my world fell apart. I found out my wife had been having an affair. The betrayal was bad enough, but what followed was even worse. For months after D-Day, she wasn't honest with me. She gaslit me so much that I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. During those dark months, I learned she had confided in a coworker. Let's call her Sam. Sam wasn't just a work friend. She was someone we'd gotten close to as a couple. Double dates, neighborhood parties, you name it. When I couldn't get the truth from my wife, I reached out to Sam, thinking she might be able to shed some light on the situation. And she did, at first. She confirmed parts of what I suspected, but also backed up some of the lies my wife was still telling me. I didn't know it then, but Sam wasn't just a bystander in this mess. She was actively covering for my wife. I leaned on Sam during that time, confiding in her because I was too embarrassed to share the situation with anyone else. She already knew the details, and I thought I could trust her. But as the weeks went by, I began to realize something was off. Later, I discovered that Sam wasn't just lying to protect my wife. She was helping her hide some of the worst details of the affair. To make matters worse, Sam had her own secrets. She'd been having an affair herself on her long-term partner and had used my wife as a cover. It felt like betrayal on top of betrayal. Knowing that her partner was still in the dark about her actions added another layer of discomfort for me. How could someone who deceived their own partner for a year pretend to care about my marriage? After 3 grueling months, my wife finally came clean during a marriage retreat. She admitted to everything. The lies, the details, all of it. That's when the full extent of how deeply Sam had gaslit me hit home. Both of them had been manipulating me, and I felt like a fool for trusting Sam at all. Since that breaking point, my wife and I have spent 18 months in therapy, both individually and as a couple. It's been an excruciatingly difficult process, but we've made progress. I've started to rebuild trust with my wife, though it hasn't been easy. She's taken significant steps to prove her commitment. She even offered to take a polygraph test, which confirmed there were no more secrets and that Sam was the only other person who knew about the affair. But while I've managed to rebuild some trust with my wife, my feelings towards Sam remain unresolved. I can't forgive her for the part she played in all of this. It wasn't just that she lied. She pretended to care, all while knowingly feeding me half-truths and reinforcing my wife's lies. I can't reconcile the idea that she once felt like a friend with the reality of what she did. The hardest part is that Sam is still in my wife's life, at least tangentially. They're co-workers, and while my wife hasn't made any one-on-one plans with her since the truth came out, they still see each other at group outings with their colleagues. Every time my wife makes plans to attend one of these gatherings, knowing Sam will be there, it feels like a slap in the face. I've told my wife how I feel, but she insists that her work relationships are important. She doesn't want to isolate herself from her coworkers, many of whom are genuinely good people. I get that, but it's hard not to feel like my feelings are being sidelined. Every time she chooses to attend one of these events, it feels like she's prioritizing her social circle over the pain Sam's presence causes me. I'm not trying to control my wife or dictate who she can and can't see, but the idea of her spending time with someone who helped cover for her affair cuts deep. I don't feel like I owe Sam forgiveness, and honestly, I'm not sure I even want to try. Recently, I hit my breaking point. I told my wife that if she continues to make time for Sam, even in group settings, I'd need her to move out. I also made it clear that if neither of them tells Sam's partner about her affair, I will. My wife seemed to understand how serious I was. She agreed to cut contact with Sam outside of work and sent her a text letting her know about my intentions. For now, this arrangement feels like a step in the right direction, but it's not a perfect solution. Sam still attends almost every social event my wife's coworkers plan, which means the issue isn't entirely resolved. My wife says she's worried about losing her other friendships, but I can't help feeling like the healthiest move would be for her to build new connections, ones that don't involve people like Sam. I know this situation is messy, but I'm doing my best to navigate it. I love my wife, our family, and the life we've built, but I can't pretend that everything is okay when Sam is still in the picture. Maybe that makes me stubborn, or maybe it's a sign that I'm not ready to let go of the hurt. Either way, I'm standing my ground. Am I wrong for feeling this way?
Weddings are supposed to be joyful occasions, and I was genuinely thrilled when my sister announced hers. At 26, I've always looked up to her. She's 30, confident, and excited to start her new chapter. I couldn't wait to celebrate with her. We've had our differences over the years, but family is family, and I wanted to support her on her big day. I've been dating Layla, my girlfriend, for almost 2 years now. She's an incredible woman, kind, intelligent, and endlessly supportive. Layla works as a contracts attorney and carries herself with a quiet strength that I admire. She's also very much herself, with a style that leans toward the masculine. She's not someone who conforms to traditional expectations, and I love that about her. When we got the wedding invitation, Layla was just as excited as I was. She picked out a stunning navy blue suit, perfectly tailored and ready to fit the formal dress code. It wasn't just any suit, it was one that reflected her personality and style while blending beautifully with the event's theme. We both couldn't wait to see her shine on the day. But then, my sister threw us a curveball. One day, during a casual conversation about the wedding, she brought up the dress code in a way that stopped me in my tracks. "Women are required to wear dresses," she said, as if it were a minor detail. I paused, unsure of how to respond. "Layla doesn't wear dresses. She hasn't since she was a child. It's just not who she is, and I knew it would make her uncomfortable." So, I asked my sister why this rule mattered so much. Her response? "It's my wedding, my rules." That didn't sit right with me. I tried to reason with her, explaining that Layla had already chosen an outfit that matched the formal vibe. I even asked if she could make an exception, but my sister wouldn't budge. She kept repeating that it was her day and we needed to respect her wishes. The more I pressed, the more her reasoning unraveled. She said it was about the vibe and making sure everyone looked cohesive in the photos. She even added that she didn't want to confuse people. It was such a bizarre statement that I didn't know how to respond. How could Layla's suit confuse anyone? Looking back, I realized this wasn't the first time my sister had been weird about Layla. When they first met, my sister commented on how mature Layla looked, a remark that felt loaded with judgment. Later, she made an offhand comment about Layla's car, saying, "She must be doing very well for herself," in a tone that didn't quite sit right. And then there was the way she referred to Layla as my friend when talking to others about the wedding. Each time I corrected her, saying, "She's my girlfriend," but my sister would just laugh it off, saying, "Oh, you know what I mean." These moments seemed small at first, but now, with this dress code issue, I couldn't ignore the pattern. It felt like she was singling Layla out, subtly but intentionally. When I brought all this up to Layla, she wasn't surprised. "If your sister wants me to skip the wedding, I'm fine with that," she said, her voice calm but resigned. I don't want to cause any drama. As much as I appreciated her understanding, it broke my heart. Layla deserved to feel welcome, not excluded. After thinking it over, I decided I couldn't stay silent anymore. I called my sister and told her how I felt. "This isn't just about a dress code," I said. "It feels like you're trying to make Layla uncomfortable, and I can't stand by and watch that happen." But my sister didn't see it that way. She accused me of being dramatic and claimed I was ruining her wedding over something silly. She doubled down on her stance, insisting it was her day and that everyone needed to follow her rules. I told her plainly, if Layla isn't welcome as herself, then I'm not coming. My parents weren't thrilled with my decision. They urged me to reconsider, saying I should just go and keep the peace. They reminded me that weddings are once-in-a-lifetime events and that my absence would be noticed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that going would mean betraying Layla and myself. In the days that followed, I wrestled with guilt and frustration. On one hand, I didn't want to let my family down. On the other, I couldn't stand the idea of supporting a decision that excluded the person I love most. Layla, as always, was supportive. "You don't have to do this for me," she said, her voice gentle. But I knew it wasn't just about her. It was about what was right. If my sister couldn't accept Layla for who she was, how could I celebrate her wedding in good conscience? So, I stood firm. I told my parents I wasn't going, and while they were disappointed, I knew it was the right choice. Love is about acceptance and respect, and I couldn't ignore the fact that my sister's rules felt like the opposite of that. Now, I'm left wondering if I did the right thing. Did I overreact? Should I have gone for the sake of family harmony? Or was I right to stand by Layla and show her that she's more important to me than a wedding dress code? One thing is certain, I refuse to compromise on what matters most. Working in an office means learning to share certain spaces, like the kitchen. I've been in my job for a few years now, and for the most part, the shared kitchen arrangement hasn't been an issue. I'm the type who prefers bringing lunch from home. It saves money, and honestly, nothing beats a homemade meal during a hectic workday. But a few months ago, something strange started happening. Every now and then, my lunch would go missing. At first, I thought maybe I was just forgetful. Did I leave it at home? Maybe I ate it and didn't remember? It sounds ridiculous now, but I honestly question myself. After all, who would just take someone else's lunch without asking? Then it happened again. And again. At that point, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Someone in the office was taking my food, and it was beyond frustrating. I decided to keep an eye out to figure out who the culprit was. It wasn't long before I started noticing a pattern. My lunch always seemed to disappear when one coworker, let's call him D, was in the kitchen around the same time. D, a guy in his mid-30s, had this casual way of snacking on things that didn't look like they belonged to him. I started to wonder if he was behind the lunch thefts. Still, I didn't want to accuse him outright without proof. So, one morning, during a team meeting, I brought it up in a general way. "Hey, just a quick note," I said, trying to sound lighthearted. "I've noticed my lunch has been disappearing lately. Can we all be mindful and respectful about not taking things that aren't ours?" The room filled with polite nods, but D didn't say a word. He just sat there, avoiding eye contact, which made me even more suspicious. But despite the gentle warning, the problem didn't stop. My food kept vanishing. By this point, I was done being polite. I started labeling my food with my name, thinking that might discourage whoever was taking it. When that didn't work, I tried hiding my lunch in the farthest, least convenient corner of the fridge. Surely, no one would go through that much effort for a free meal, right? Wrong. When I found my carefully hidden container missing yet again, I was furious. It felt like whoever was doing this just didn't care about basic respect. I couldn't focus on work anymore. I was too distracted by the sheer audacity of it all. That night, I had an idea. I decided to bring something to lunch that D, or anyone else who wasn't a fan of spicy food, would regret taking. I whipped up one of my favorite dishes, a spicy pasta loaded with chili. And when I say spicy, I mean the kind of heat that makes your eyes water. I labeled the container, "Very Spicy," in bold letters, hoping to deter any adventurous thieves. The next day, I placed the pasta in the fridge and went about my work. Sure enough, by lunchtime, it was gone. I shook my head, half amused and half annoyed. Whoever had been stealing my food clearly couldn't resist, even with the warning label. A few hours later, D started looking pale and uncomfortable. He clutched his stomach and complained loudly about how terrible he felt. When he left work early, I didn't think much of it until a coworker casually mentioned that D had admitted to eating my lunch. He'd apparently assumed the "very spicy" label was an exaggeration. I was stunned. Not only had he taken my lunch again, but now he was suffering because of it. Part of me felt bad. No one deserves to feel physically sick, but another part of me thought, well, maybe this will teach him a lesson. The aftermath wasn't exactly what I expected. Word got around the office, and while some coworkers were on my side, others started whispering that I'd gone too far. One even accused me of being intentionally dangerous by bringing in such a spicy dish. But here's the thing, I never forced D or anyone else to eat my lunch. It was clearly labeled as mine, and the warning about the spice level was right there in bold letters. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet I felt like I was being blamed for his actions. Still, the whole situation left me feeling conflicted. Was I really at fault for bringing in something I liked to eat, just because someone else stole it? Should I have handled it differently? One thing I knew for sure, stealing someone else's lunch is wrong, and if this was what it took for Dee to finally stop, maybe it was worth it.
Last weekend, my parents attended my half-brother's wedding. He's 27 now, and for as long as I can remember, there's always been some tension between us as a family. My younger brother, who's 15, and I, at 17, weren't invited to the wedding. The official reason was that it was an adults-only event, but it quickly became clear that this wasn't the whole truth. During the wedding, my parents had what you might call a wake-up moment. A series of things happened that opened their eyes to how my half-brother truly felt about us. First, during his speech, he referred to his best friend as the sibling he never had, adding that being an only child made him appreciate friendships like theirs. That stung, but it didn't stop there. He went on to mention relatives who couldn't attend the wedding, including 2 cousins under 18, along with young family members from his wife's side. Yet, there was no mention of me or my younger brother. When my parents questioned his wife about this, she admitted that my half-brother has never seen us as siblings. She even mentioned he frequently referred to himself as an only child, swapping terms like real and actual when talking about siblings. My parents were blindsided by this. They had believed all along that he was still processing grief from losing his mom and that with time, things would get better. What they heard at the wedding shattered that belief. To give you some context, my half-brother's mom passed away when he was just 5 years old. My dad met my mom a year later, and they dated for a few years before getting married when my half-brother was 9. I was born the following year, and 2 years after that, my younger brother came along. From the start, it was clear that my half-brother didn't want much to do with us. He wasn't mean, but he wasn't exactly warm either. The age gap was part of it, I'm sure, but he made it obvious in other ways too. I remember him telling us not to call him our brother, or if we had to, we should use half-brother to make it clear we weren't real siblings. My dad tried hard to bridge the gap. He put my half-brother in therapy and even brought us to family counseling before he and my mom got married. They genuinely thought they could help him work through his feelings of grief and resentment. Over the years, they organized family outings, spent quality time together, and encouraged bonding, all in the hope that he'd eventually come around. But I saw things differently. While my parents held on to hope, I started to realize, even as a kid, that my half-brother's feelings about us weren't going to change. He didn't want to be a big brother, and he didn't see us as family. It wasn't something therapy or time could fix. As I got older, the distance between us became more apparent. We barely interacted, and when we did, it was always brief and superficial. He stopped visiting as soon as he moved out, and any attempts to connect with him fell flat. I tried following him on social media once, but he never accepted the request. I even texted him a few times, but he never replied. It hurt, but I learned to stop trying. My younger brother had a similar experience. Despite my parents' best efforts, we both knew that our half-brother didn't see us as part of his life. By the time the wedding came around, none of this surprised me. The adults-only rule wasn't really about keeping the event formal. It was about keeping us out. But my parents, ever optimistic, didn't see it that way until the wedding made it impossible to ignore. When my parents came home from the wedding, they were upset. They talked to me and my younger brother, trying to make sense of what had happened. "We're so sorry you had to find out this way," my dad said, his voice heavy with guilt. I told them we already knew. My brother nodded in agreement. "We've known for years," I said. "It's not exactly a secret." My parents looked shocked. "How?" my mom asked. "Why didn't you say anything?" I explained that it was obvious from the way he treated us, ignoring us, keeping us at arm's length, and never engaging. My brother chimed in, saying he'd realized it a few years ago too. They seemed genuinely hurt, not just by my half-brother's behavior, but by the fact that we had noticed and accepted it long before they did. They admitted they'd never believed him when he said we weren't his siblings. "We thought he just needed time," my mom said. "We thought therapy would help." That's when I said it. "It's a little late to start believing him now," I told them. "You spent years trying to fix something that wasn't fixable. He doesn't want to change how he feels about us, and pushing it now isn't going to help." My parents didn't take it well. They weren't angry, exactly, but I could tell I'd hurt their feelings. "That's not fair," my dad said. "We had no reason to think it was more than a grieving kid trying to figure things out." Maybe they're right. Maybe it wasn't fair to say it that way. But at the same time, I stand by what I said. My half-brother made it clear how he felt, and while my parents were busy holding on to hope, my younger brother and I were left to accept the reality of the situation. Now, I'm left wondering if I was too harsh. Should I have been more understanding of my parents' perspective? Or was it right to be honest, even if it hurt? Either way, I don't think there's any fixing this now. My half-brother has made his feelings clear, and I'm not sure anyone can change that.